live, and it looks like we are live in the Magic 3. Hey, everybody, and welcome to my latest interview with Dr. Shawn. Dr. Shawn is the Chief Science Officer at Amare Global. Welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Don.
So today our topic is the mental edge. And I noticed recently that the website of Amare Global has changed a little bit to talk about the mental edge. Oh, let me introduce you first. I never give you credit for anything. I actually have a good introduction for you. So besides being the Chief Science Officer, founding CEO of Amare Global, Dr. Talbott is also a psychonutritionist. He has his MS in exercise science from UMass Amherst, go Minutemen, PhD with nutritional biochemistry, and a certificate in entrepreneurship and innovation from MIT, which I actually think is really important for this conversation because we want to be talking about innovation when we talk about the mental edge, right?
Right, for sure. Yeah, because there's so many different ways to think about it now than what we used to. But we'll get into that kind of stuff.
Let me just finish because I've got a new twist on my introduction to you right here. So you've also worked with elite athletes, International Olympic Committee. You're your own elite athlete, ultramarathons, Ironmans, all those big fancy things, which are awesome. I'm such a fan of those extreme sport kind of things. But also you're the author of The Cortisol Connection, The Vigor Diet, vigor is my new favorite word, The Immune Miracle, and The Guide to Understanding Dietary Supplements. So I want to kind of give you credit for being an educator and an innovator in this field of nutrition, mental wellness, fitness, mental fitness, physical fitness. So, I think it's amazing that you have been an innovator for 20 years or more, right, in this field. So,
well, yeah, I guess. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. We're so lucky to have you.
One of the things that makes me, an innovator, if you want to call me that, is that I try to stay on the cutting edge of science, right? And the thing about science that is exciting to me, but can sometimes be frustrating for a lot of people who are trying to figure it out, is that it changes, right? And, you spend 20 years studying something, it's one thing at one point, and you think you have it all figured out, and you educate people about that, and then the science changes because we discover more things, and then you have to go, all right, do I completely switch gears and switch directions, or do I try to incorporate this new thing into the old thing and sort of build on it? And so if you look at my career, it looks like beautifully planned, and it was absolutely not that at all, because it was all a little bit of, well, I'm over here doing sports medicine, and then I'm over there doing exercise science, and then over there doing nutritional biochemistry, and then nutritional psychology, and then entrepreneurship, but it's all sort of a common theme, because as the science changes, we incorporate that new thinking and try to help people with the newest, latest and greatest.
Yeah. I have so much to say right now. So throughout your career, do you feel like you have pivoted?
Yeah. So let me give you an example of my writing, right? So I spent most of today working on, so I'm writing a new book, and the new book is about mental fitness. So it's completely dialed into what we're doing, what we're talking about this afternoon. But it's, there's one chapter on the brain, there's one chapter on the gut, there's one chapter on the heart. The chapter I was working on today was about stress and sleep. So it used to be, when I started doing this work 20 years ago, it used to be purely a brain thing, right? We would say, you get stressed out in your brain, it causes this flood of stress hormones like cortisol that causes all kinds of problems. If we can either solve the problem here in the brain or solve the problem at the level of the hormone cortisol, you're good to go, right? That's what we knew 20 years ago. And then it became, wait a minute, it's not just that, it's also inflammation, and it's also oxidation, and it's also blood sugar control. And nowadays, the very cutting edge science is around the gut, that a lot of our stress resilience doesn't come from here, our head, it actually comes from our second brain, our gut. And so that's why, if somebody wants to be, have the mental edge, there's certainly things we're going to do in the brain, but if we forget about the gut and forget about all this new research that's coming out, you're never going to be resilient. You're never going to be able to sort of roll with the punches.
Yeah.
You're always going to be like sort of one step behind, if you will. So like the more we can think of it in that, like what I call a systems approach, and say like, what does that whole system look like? Stress physiology or microbiome signaling or all of that. Let's incorporate as much of that as possible into the systems that we give people, and therefore they're going to get better results.
So what I really love about the conversations, I get to have with you, I feel so fortunate that I get to interview you in this group. It's such a treat for me to have these conversations, because I've been following science. I've been following psychology for a really long time. I've worked in it. I've been a caregiver. I've been a clinician, so on and so forth. And I know things are always evolving. But in my career, just like yours, we ignored the gut and the microbiome until just recently, right? Like in the history of science, this is like the baby, right? Like the last few years is really when we've discovered it's great. The brain is great. We want to optimize the brain. We're not like saying the brain isn't important, but if you add the microbiome in the gut and the gut-brain axis, you're like having so much more opportunity to improve your mental fitness, physical fitness. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. And the way that I kind of explain it is that things we can do in the brain is it's almost like as powerful as the brain is, if that's all we're focusing on, it's like you're trying to do your work with just a handheld calculator. You bring in the gut and the trillions of bacteria there, now you've got a supercomputer. You bring in the axis in between, which is largely your immune system, but also involves your endocannabinoid system and your circulatory system, et cetera. Now you're talking about like, a distributed cloud network, right? It's just like, it's going to a different level. And I think that people who want to get the most out of themselves, whether it's mentally or physically, that kind of a story resonates with them, because it's a new tool, right? The old thinking is, well, I'll drink a cup of coffee, or I'll take one of these, nootropics were really popular for a while. These supplements that you could take that would sort of stimulate your brain. That is a little bit older thinking, but now we can say, why don't we harness all of these different tools that you have access to really take you to that highest level of performance?
So let's talk about that for a second. So in all of your career and all of your years of work and the people that you've worked with, what do you know about high performers?
Yeah, well, I at one point in my career, I'm an old guy now, but one point in my career, I was one of those high achievers, right? I was on the U.S. national team for rowing.
I would say you're still a high achiever. I think you just ran 100 kilometers a couple weeks ago, did you not?
You can see my road rash here, but I had a terrible bike crash.
Don't let him fool you. He is still a high achiever.
It
may take a little longer to recover. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, exactly. But so
yeah,
back in those days, I was doing it for myself. But then as I get more educated and I get my master's degree and I get my PhD and all that kind of stuff, and I started working with, the runners at the Olympic Training Center and working with professional triathletes and et cetera, what we found is that, getting that mental edge could really enable the athletes to go to a different plane on their physical performance. So like when you're working with one of the US ski team members, right? That's a pretty mentally intensive activity, right? They need to have good reaction speed. They need to, control their stress. They need to be able to, be resilient, all that kind of stuff. But if they can get just a fraction of a percent better in their mind, they can get a fraction of a percent better in their physical performance. And that quite literally can be the difference between the gold medal and not even being in the finals, right? So it's a big difference. For the average person, that can mean the difference of, coming up with that creative thought, solving a problem, being present and calm in a stressful situation in your family versus flying off the handle. I mean, it really can, it can make meaningful differences in your life.
Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking, let's take the Olympic skier, like they are at the top of the mountain and they're visualizing every turn before they get to it, right? Like, so that's their mental edge, like to be able to visualize the entire course without standing on it yet, right? Yeah. So I think I relate to it as a mom. Like for me as a mom, juggling, like spinning all my plates, my business, my family, my responsibilities, I want to visualize my day, and I want to visualize it going smoothly.
Right.
That gives me the mental edge, right? And
Right.
plus the products we're going to talk about in a minute. But I want to be able to visualize my day. I want to be able to visualize how a phone call is going to go when I'm trying to get somebody to join my team, or a CEO wants to visualize the board meeting and how things are going to go before it happens, right? It's really, we're talking about the same thing. That's a high performer mental edge, is it not?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And one of the things that I've discovered over the years of not just studying it from a scientific academic perspective, but actually putting it into practice with coaches and athletes, it is that, you can visualize all you want. You can have that sort of perfect plan, but, I'll say it this way, the very famous quote from Mike Tyson: everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? Whenever, like if that skier visualizes the whole thing, knows the course, but they catch an edge, they get a gust of wind. The fact that you can be dynamic in the face of that stressor, something happens on the call that you weren't expecting, whatever, that ability to be able to pivot in the moment and adjust, that's the mental edge.
I love that you said that.
Part of that's neurotransmitters, part of that is what the gut is doing, part of that is, it really is this whole system.
Well, and I think we know, and we've got a bunch of people watching right now, I think people know the gut is part of it, because when things go wrong or unexpected, you first feel it, you sense it in your sensing brain, in your gut, right? You're like, oh, and you kind of just want to vomit, right? Like when things don't go as planned, you feel it here first, and then you try to rationalize it and think your way through it. But first it's like a sense, like of doom or something, right?
Exactly.
And how do I recover?
Right. Everybody's felt that sort of, you're stressed out and you feel it in your gut, or you have a gut sensation or a gut feeling about something. People have experienced these things since forever. It's only in the last couple of years that we've been actually able to measure it. And once we could measure it and we could modulate it, we can change it in a positive direction, right? So that's a new tool that we didn't have, 5 years ago. Yeah.
So what are people still getting wrong?
Well, they're getting wrong that they think that they can just tough their way through it, right? That they can just buckle down and use their brain to just muscle their way through the stress that we're under right now. And that's where people really go wrong, because first of all, it's not very effective. But the more you spin your wheels, the worse it gets. And the harder you try, the less effective you're going to be. One of the really, really cool things, and this is something that a lot of high achievers kind of bristle against, right? That if you can get this whole system, right? And people see me do this all the time, right? When I talk about the whole gut-brain axis as a system, if you can get that coordinated, it almost makes your struggle easy. And high achievers don't want to hear about easy. They always want to go harder, right? Put in more effort. But if you can get all of this signaling, it almost is like you get into this flow state where it just happens. It's like, that pivot that you need to make sometimes that I just talked about, that almost happens in slow motion, where you see it coming before anybody else does. That's what I mean by high achievement.
Yeah. I'm sort of laughing because I just listened to a podcast about being in flow today. There's the guy, I can't pronounce his last name. Do you know who I'm talking about, that wrote the book about the flow?
Stephen Kotler, probably.
No? I'll send it to you. It's like a Norwegian name or something.
Yeah, I've got his book right up there.
It's about being in flow.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi.
Something like that.
He's the godfather of flow.
Of flow, yeah.
Exactly.
So awesome book.
Anyway. And a lot of his early work, right? He was measuring the kind of stuff that we're talking about right now. He could observe it in people. He knew when they were in flow. But now, sort of fast forward 20 or 30 years, we can actually go, aha, this is how you can go in and you can actually naturally nudge somebody into flow because of what we're doing in the gut brain.
It totally jazzes me up with what you're saying, and the fact that I listened to this podcast this morning, because they were saying exactly the same thing. When you tough it out, you're actually resisting possibility, right? You're resisting creativity, right?
That's right.
And you're resisting the download from the universe. My friend Shannon Boyle will understand that of like the other way that you could make things work for yourself, right? So while we're on this topic, how many times, and for anybody out there that you can reply on Facebook, how many times have you ever caught a cold or felt yourself getting sick and you say to yourself, I don't have time for this?
Right.
That's such a high achiever way of thinking. Like, I don't have time for this. And so instead of slowing down, like your body's like, you're going to get that sinus infection. You're going to, you know, get that cold. You're going to get that cough. And instead you're like, no, I'm not. And you keep going. So like, let's talk immunity for a minute. Cause you did mention the axis is our immunity. Can we talk a little bit about how a high achiever who really doesn't have time to get sick can really prime their immunity with what we have here in Amare so that you can maintain your high achieving like behavior, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I started studying the immune system back when I was working with the US ski team. And it was purely from the perspective of, you know, hey, we have a problem. These athletes are traveling all around the world. They're in airports, they're in hotel rooms, they're in, you know, freezing cold mountains doing their training. They're not getting good nutrition sometimes because of their travels. And if they get sick, they can't compete, they can't train, their performance suffers, all that kind of stuff. So the idea was, let's see what we can do for their immune system to keep them well so they can keep training and competing and not getting hurt and not getting sick, right? So that was the objective. We were able to do that by doing things in the immune system. We were doing things then in the gut that we didn't really have an appreciation for back then of how we were changing the microbiome and things like that. But one of the things that we found was that these athletes, if their immune system was stronger, what these days we call primed, they didn't get sick. They didn't get hurt. They didn't, you know, they were able to recover faster. All the things you want your immune system to do. What we discovered was that they also felt better. Their psychological vigor, which is physical energy, mental acuity, emotional well-being, was also about 20% higher. And so that's why it's so important that the immune system is part of that gut-brain axis to take us to that high achievement. The immune system protecting us from illness is one piece of it, awesome, but it also, because it's a better communication system between our two brains, that is sensed in the body as better physical and mental wellness. And so that, you know, now these days, the immune system is looked at as a way to improve mental performance and physical performance as much as it's looked at as a way to keep us from getting sick.
So I love that. And I feel like it's, what you're saying is what we need so much right now. Like right now in July of 2020, when kids are, you know, parents are thinking about sending their kids back to school, going back into the office themselves as the nation maybe opens up, maybe doesn't. We need immunity, and we also need vigor, right? The energy and the emotional balance, because things are stressful and we don't know, right? There's so much unknown that adds to our stress, in my opinion.
Let me just share with you a little exchange that I had with our marketing team today over email, right? So because we're the mental wellness company and we're doing things in the brain, we're doing things in the gut, we do so many things in the immune system with our products around, you know, if you do something with mentobiotics, probiotics and prebiotics in the gut, you're going to have an immune system benefit. If you use the alpha and beta glucans that we have in MentaSync, you're going to get an immune system benefit, etc. I was joking around with them. I said, look, we're doing so much around the immune system. We could just as easily be the immune system company as we are the mental wellness company, right? Because the two things are so closely linked together. And so I was like, maybe there's something fun that we can do around that as people do what you just described, start going back into the world and get stressed out about, you know, these people around me, and do I need to wear a mask or social distance? Am I going to get infected? Like, you can't control that necessarily. So stop worrying about it. Worry about the things you can control, which is your immune system and your gut integrity and your inflammation. And those are in your control. And there's things you can do naturally.
So we've heard you say before that dieting causes the stress that leads to weight loss resistance. So does stressing out about being in the community, going back to school, lower our immune system? Like, does the added stress of thinking about the things we can't control, does that give a hit to our immune system, would you say?
Hugely. Yeah, the more, so there's sort of three things that can predict whether something's going to be really stressful to you, right? Do you have an outlet for your stress? Like, do you have a hobby or exercise regimen or, you know, something like that, right? But also the two that people get confused about are, is something in your control and is something predictable? And they kind of go back and forth with each other, right? There's an interplay of, is it predictable, is it controllable? And if somebody thinks that they can control everything, that's going to cause them more stress, right? You have to realize what you can control and what you can't. The predictability piece of it, if stress is predictable, like that the same thing is going to happen every single day at 2 p.m., right? We can adapt to that perfectly fine. But when it becomes unpredictable and things are coming at you on a weird schedule, we don't adapt to that very well. So like worrying about what's happening out there in the world, that is not effective. That's gonna take a toll on our ability to sleep. It's gonna take a toll on our mood. It's gonna take a toll on our immune system. It's really that's one of the reasons with athletes, just use another example, that some of the most successful athletes are the ones that have a good network around them, right? So they don't have to worry about all these tiny little details. If they can just focus more on the things that they can control, which is, their nutrition and their workouts and their focus and stuff, they do a lot better, right? You're removing a lot of that noise, and there's a lot of noise in our system right now, for sure.
There sure is. Yeah, there sure is. So, I want to wrap it up with, so what is our solution? Like we really, I think, nailed the problem here. So what is Amare Global's solution to this, right? To priming to keeping your immune system primed all the time, really, not just during COVID or during whatever other things, craziness on social media. What is Amare Global giving us to help us with keeping our immune system primed all the time, helping us manage our internal stress level or our ability to manage what's, coming at us on a day-to-day basis, and keeping us focused and our energy high enough so that we actually can feel joy despite the disruption around us. So
right. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit of our core product.
Yeah. So think back to that, what I was describing before about a systems approach, right? If the problem is how we described it, it's all these intervening factors, we need a solution that's also going to be multifactorial, right? Be able to sort of buffer back against all those different levers, if you will. And so that's what our kit called the Fundamentals Pack really is about. It's a coordinated gut-brain axis system. So it's making sure your microbiome is good, so you're producing the right kinds of neurotransmitters. It's making sure that your gut integrity is sound so that you don't have problems in your immune system and your inflammatory cascade. It's making sure the signals go across your immune system the right way. It's making sure that your brain is focused and resilient and connected and all those things that we talked about. So the Fundamentals Pack is usually the first place somebody would start if they want to improve their mental edge. But then we have other products that can be layered on top of that. So we've got products that are specifically for physical performance, like our mental heart. We've got products that are specifically for energy or for stress resilience or for sleep quality. So, depending on how much that sort of chronic stress has disrupted somebody might need a few products, very focused, or they might need a sort of a wider lens of a bigger regimen, if you will.
Yeah, so that's why I actually really love that you've started to put the two of my favorite packs together into a combo pack, which is our fundamentals, which we call the Magic 3 here in this group. The MentaSync, the Mentabiotics, and the MentaFocus, which is the gut-brain axis system. Here, you got me doing it too. And then our Mental Fitness Pack, which is the sleep, relief, mood, and energy, which is the short-term results. It's like those quick results while you're helping your gut to become more normalized with your microbiome to be more normalized bacteria. So I love that we have them together as the combo pack. What would you say to somebody who's sort of well, I have another actually question before I get into that. We often have people say, well, where do these ingredients come from? Where do these products come from? How do I know that they're like what they say they are, kind of thing? And I actually think Amare Global should feel really proud of the way we source our ingredients. So would you mind taking a second to say, like, this is where it comes from, this is how I know it is what we say it is, and how we help other communities in other countries run a sustainable business too?
Yeah. So that's actually one of the funnest parts of my job, is that, when we identify a sort of a problem area that we're going to focus on, like stress resilience, for example. We'll identify ingredients that have been studied for that particular outcome. And then once we know what the ingredient is, it might be a leaf, it might be a root, it might be an amino acid, whatever the case may be, then we have to decide where we're going to get it. So because we've got such a broad range of products, 22 different products, all geared towards mental wellness, we have a global supply chain. Some of those products come from North America, some of them come from South America, some of them come from Asia, some come from Africa. We're sourcing from everywhere. And that's good because it gives us a wide range of ingredients to bring to bear on this problem as solutions. But the problem is, unless you have good contact with those suppliers, you don't know, is that field being sprayed with pesticides? Is it being grown in a sustainable way? Are they treating their workers the right way? Like, all those things are really, really important. So you could go to one level and say, well, every time we get an ingredient in from South Africa, let's say, we're going to analyze it in the laboratory and make sure it's chemically what we want and it's not contaminated with anything. And so we do that, right? But then we also go the next level where, like, I'll get on a plane and go to South Africa and stand in the field where we're sourcing the stuff from, and we'll do clippings on the plant to do DNA analysis to make sure that it really is the right species. And that's all important too. But there's this other level of, our palm fruit extract is a good example that we have in Mental Heart. We source that from a plantation in Mexico. I've gone to that plantation to meet with the people who grow it, to meet with the people who harvest it, to see where the harvesting staff lives, to see, what they're, because they come to this very remote area of the plantation. They live there for a couple of weeks, do the harvesting, make their money, go back to their families. So we want to make sure they have health insurance. We want to make sure that they're being treated properly. We want to make sure they're being fed. We want to make, like, all of that doesn't make it into the product necessarily, but from an ethical, sustainable, like, global supply chain, like, those are important
so
things.
Important. I think we don't talk about that enough, and there's so many things to talk about, but I actually think that that's a really important piece of our company and what we're doing here, and how we are part of this ripple effect to other communities, and are helping other people become profitable for themselves, like this community in Mexico, and helping people have a good clean work to be able to do. So it's really important. And that's one of the things I really love about Amare Global is we have the highest integrity when it comes to the quality of what we're putting out. People ask that question all the time. And I feel like, you can hand somebody a PDF that says, here's all the things we do that are right. But I wanted to have you say it out loud so that we could just refer back to this video, for anybody that asked that question, because that is really important to people these days, is that things are sustainably sourced and ethically sourced, and, so.
Yeah, it makes a big difference, because it would be a lot easier for us to get a cheaper ingredient that doesn't follow all that stuff, right? And a lot of companies would do that. They would say, this ingredient costs X and this one costs 10 cents less. I'm going to go with that one because it makes my margins better. But 10 cents isn't worth it to us to have some of the problems that we see out there. So and that's why Amare Global stands alone, I think, in this environment, right, in this industry. So so with that, any last words on somebody being, a high performer on the fence, like, I don't know if these supplements are right for me? You're a high performer yourself. You've worked with lots of high performers. The entire CEO's, board is high performers. What would you say to somebody who's like, I'm not sure if this is for me? Like, do you have any last words for somebody like that? Yeah, I think, and as a scientist, this might not sound like the answer that you would want, right? Like, I would point to the research, right? Which we can do for every single ingredient that we're talking about. But you almost have to, you have to experience it for yourself to see what that change in mental edge is going to do for your mental performance and your physical performance, right? So, for one individual, it might be that your stress resilience is improved and you're able to handle more load, so to speak, before you break. For somebody else, it might be that your reaction time is quicker. For somebody else, it might be that you're more focused or you're more present. I mean, it really is going to be a little bit different for every person. Just use myself as an example. In the 100K run that I did last Saturday, two Saturdays ago, you know, it's not a physical thing. Like my legs hurt, my knees were sore, my feet were swollen, like so was everybody. But the fact that you could keep going across a boulder field, that is 100% mental. And like, that's not, you're not going to get that from a caffeine drink. You're not going to get that from a stimulant, nootropic. That is a resilience thing that's coming from in here somewhere, your gut, your heart. And like, you have to feel that. You have to experience it to really understand it. And once you do, you'll go, aha, that's what he was talking about. I totally understand now.
Yeah, that's such a great way to say it. Like, you really have to experience it for yourself, because the results are different a little bit for each person, depending on what you're looking for, depending on what you've been through, this, you know, the state of your gut today. But people do feel better, and people almost always say, I don't know what it is. And we say, it's the magic 3.
Right.
We know what it is.
People also say, they'll very often come back. I'm sure you've heard this a lot. They'll come back and they'll go, oh my gosh, I didn't think I needed this kind of thing, right? I thought it was good before, right? And high achievers are good. They're actually a lot better than me. And so they might think, well, I'm doing better than those guys over there. I probably don't need this. But once you experience that resilience, or whatever label you want to put on it, vigor, you go, aha, now I can do X where I couldn't do that before. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Shawn, thank you so much for joining us again in the Magic 3. We really appreciate that you make yourself available to come in and answer some silly questions from time to time. And
my pleasure. They're not silly. They're a lot of fun.
it's always really a jolt to our group to hear from you, like to literally just hear from you versus reading a PDF or watching you in a video. So I really appreciate you taking the time for us today.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining today, you guys.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.